It's Harry Judd for Boxing Social in partnership with Empire Fight Store. I'd like to be joined by Dan Rafael. Like I just explained just before then, looking to do a little bit more of a yearly roundup. So these would be like just sort of quick fire questions. We can go back and forth in terms of what we thought the highlights, the not so good parts of 2022 have been. So first of all, as a journalist yourself, worked in the industry for many years, what's been the main story of the year, do you think?
I think there's a couple things that stand out to me that were sort of big deals this year. One of them is the year of the women taking their place center stage in the sport.
Definitely.
A long time coming. We've seen some tremendous battles and the top fighters facing each other. The two main ones that come to mind were the Matchroom show at Madison Square Garden that was headlined by the tremendous battle between Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano. And it was just a few months later where over in London was a big-time doubleheader with Clarissa Shields against Savannah Marshall and Alicia Baumgartner against Michaela Mayer. Those two shows, along with lots of other fights in the women's side of boxing, that showed that, you know, when the right fights are made, men or women, that the fans will accept it and turn out for it and get excited about it. Same with the media. And so I think this was a big year for women's boxing, probably the biggest year ever. I mean, there's been women's boxing for a long time, but in terms of really getting in front of the mainstream more than it ever had, I think 2022 was a really big deal. And I'm assuming that we're going to see it grow from there because there's still other big matches to make, whether it's other fights that are fresh or rematches. There's a lot of possibilities. So that was one thing. And the other thing that comes to mind, again, there's been a good thing in boxing where there's obviously lots of negative things we could talk about, but there was a lot of undisputed fights this year. Charlo Castagna, Devin Haney against George Kambosos. We just saw, as we taped this, Paul Butler getting blown out by Naoya Inoue in the bantamweight undisputed fight. But there have been a number of those kinds of fights, and that's good for the sport. And I guess if there was one other thing is, while the two things I just mentioned are extremely positive, the breaking out of big time women's fights, and then of course undisputed fights. And by the way, undisputed goes for the men and for the women. But there's also the negative side, which is we have not gotten certain fights that we thought we would get, and it's just another year in the books where we didn't get Anthony Joshua against Tyson Fury, and we didn't get Errol Spence against Terrence Crawford, and the list goes on as far as those types of matchups that we want to see. We didn't see Alexander Usyk against Tyson Fury. Now, hopefully, we'll see some of those fights in the future, but time doesn't wait for any fighter.
In terms of those type of fights and stuff, in terms of this year, in terms of the main aspects of this year, and in terms of the positives that you've outlined, has this year been a more positive side of the sport, or has it again been totally mixed?
I mean, there are certainly the good points that I mentioned, but for my money, I mean, unfortunately, and I hate to be Mr. Negative, I try not to be negative all the time. I mean, there's definitely good things, but I felt like 2022 was definitely a down year for the sport. A big part of that was because many of the best fighters, not just like one or two, but so many of the best fighters in boxing, particularly in terms of the men, only fought one time or no times. That you cannot have a sport that is so driven by star power and by the names if the best names only fight once a year. Now, some of them fought, there are 2 times. Tyson Fury fought 2 times, maybe not the biggest fights ever, even though he drew great crowds. Canelo Alvarez fought 2 times. But there's too many of the great fighters of our day that just didn't. I mean, and that's disappointing.
Yeah, I definitely see that. Obviously years ago, you used to see people fighting 3-4 times a year. Now it's, Canelo will fight 2 times a year. Anthony Joshua, hopefully next year, will fight. We don't know his situation yet, but hopefully we'll get 2 fights out of him. But it just seems like that is the norm now for those big names. It's
really disappointing. I mean, you had, take the Charlos. They're tremendous fighters. One Charlo had 1 fight. The other Charlo had no fights. You had Usyk fought 1 time. You can go on down the list go through any weight class, and you'll see a ton of guys that just did not fight regular. David Benavidez had one fight. Caleb Plant had one fight. Deontay Wilder had one fight. Errol Spence had one fight. Terrence Crawford had one fight, was off for a year. You go on right down the list of fighters. Josh Taylor had one fight. And these are all these names I'm mentioning are top champions or top contenders. And then there's others that did fight more than once. I mentioned Fury. I mentioned, Inoue had two fights with the performance against Butler and the knockout against Nonito Donaire in the rematch. But too many of the best guys fight once a year. Now, part of that's their own decision. Part of that sometimes can be attributed to something along the lines of maybe there's a promoter or manager problem, maybe an injury. Some of it's budgets, television networks, they only have X number of dollars to go around and they can't necessarily accommodate everybody. And so it feels like sometimes where it used to be and the expectation that the best guys at the minimum would fight twice a year, now it's almost like some of these best guys are getting in two fights over the course of 18 months. And that's not a way to build the sport. And especially, I get tired of hearing about, okay, if you're going to accept the fact that you might fight once every 18 months, or even if you do fight twice a year, or even if you fight once a year, I don't want to hear like when you come back, I need a tune-up fight. No, that's bullshit. You're not getting a tune-up. If you're fighting 3 or 4 times a year, by all means, slip in that sort of softer touch to stay active and keep sharp. But if you're only going to the post once or even twice, they should be meaningful fights. So as an example, last year, when Canelo fought 4 times in 11 months, beginning at the end of 2020 through the end of 2021, he slipped in this so-called soft touch fight. It was the mandatory against Yildirim. There was no problem because in between that, he's fighting Callum Smith and Billy Joe Saunders and unification for the undisputed against Caleb Plant. 3 big-time fights and one sort of like soft touch, but he was active. If he had fought only once or twice in the year, and one of those was against Yildirim, I think that media and fans would have every right to be upset. But if you slide that kind of fight in the middle of a robust schedule, no problem. But now when you see these guys fight once, twice a year, and they want to have a tune-up fight, I don't buy that. Forget about it.
Would that comment then still be relevant, or will it be relevant for Tyson Fury's year?
For 2020, you mean what he did in 2022? Mm-hmm. Well, if Fury's he had the huge fight with Dillian White going in. That was a fight that everybody wanted to see. And he was hopeful to make the match with Usyk by the end of the year, maybe the Joshua fight. Those did not happen. And if you go on the notion that there's a very likely chance that he will fight Usyk in the first part of next year, I didn't necessarily have a problem with him taking a lesser fight against Chisora. I would have preferred him take a different opponent than Chisora. Yeah. But I'm happy that Tyson Fury fought 2 times. He's the heavyweight champion of the world. He should be in front of the public more than once a year.
Moving swiftly on then, fighter of the year. Who would you pick?
That's part of the reason why it was a down year, because it's overall not a deep group of guys. The fighter that I think probably should be the fighter of the year is Dimitri Bivol. Now, he could be the fighter of the year in any year.
Yeah. But
there wasn't like a lot of competition for him to go up against, in my mind. In my mind, he's the guy because he was active by our relative standards, meaning 2 fights. Mm-hmm. One was a upset, at least by the way the sports books had it listed. A tremendous performance and victory in a big spot against Canelo Alvarez, taking down the pound-for-pound number 1, even if he was moving up in weight, but a weight that he had fought in previously and won a world title. So that was a huge, huge victory. And then to come back off of that victory and not just beat an undefeated fighter like Zurdo Ramirez, a worthy number 1 contender, a guy that had been a champion in super middleweight, and he didn't just win against him. He won, 11 or 12 rounds of the fight. I mean, he just completely blew the doors off him. He didn't knock him out, but he did everything other than get the knockout. So when you score those types of 2 wins in a row over the course of the year, that's a hard resume to overcome in terms of fighter of the year. And a lot of the other fighters that had good wins either fought maybe not that same level of opposition that Bivol fought, or they just had the one fight. Like, for example, Charlo beat Castagno in the rematch to become undisputed. That's a great victory and a big accomplishment, but he only fought 1 time. And if you take into account, say, like a kid like Devin Haney, he had a big year, 2 victories in a dominating fashion against George Kambosos, one to become undisputed, the other in terms of an immediate rematch defending the title. So he had a great year also. But I don't know if I can put him ahead of Bivol, because with all respect to Haney, who I thought looked great in those fights and is a tremendous fighter, and I'm a big fan. He was the favorite, frankly, in those fights, even if he did travel. So he's on the list of guys that should be in consideration, but I don't know how in good conscience you could actually necessarily give him Fighter of the Year. So there were guys that had good years, but Bivol's, to me, stood above and beyond everybody else.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. But with that sentiment as well, then, do you, the Ring magazine obviously released their latest heavyweight rankings with what you've just said. Then, do you agree with their rankings at the moment?
I didn't see who were their rankings. Who was?
So it was Usyk #1, Tyson Fury, Bronze Bomber, Anthony Joshua, Joe Joyce, Ruiz, Dillian White, Luis Ortiz, Joe Parker, Philip Hergovich, and Frank Sanchez at number 10.
So they put Usyk at #1.
Yeah,
not Tyson Fury.
I believe.
Well, okay.
So.
First of all, the Ring magazine. Listen, I love the guys at the Ring. Their staff they're friends of mine. I've done a ton of work for them over the last few years. Not a whole lot this year, but I've done a lot of work with them, and I have massive respect. I've read the Ring magazine since I'm a kid. In this office I'm sitting in, I've got the boxes of almost a complete run of the Ring magazine since they started back in the early 1900s. However, they made a big mistake, in my opinion, when they vacated the Ring magazine heavyweight title. So that's why Usyk is ahead of Fury, because Fury said he was retired. Everybody knew it was bullshit. I understand that their editors asked Tyson Fury about it. He said, fine, I'm giving up the title. But if they just kept their mouth shut and didn't bother to ask him, he'd have fought a couple of weeks later like he ended up doing. And because he retired, which was bullshit, the title was vacated. And when Anthony Joshua and Usyk had their rematch in August, they made that fight for the vacant title. But Tyson Fury was never truly retired, and everybody knows that. And he did come back in a timely fashion, and he did beat the shit out of Derek Chisora. And so he no longer has the Ring title. So that's why he's below Usyk.
Yeah,
he really should be ahead of Usyk. All respect to Usyk's accomplishments, but Tyson Fury is the #1 heavyweight. So to answer your question, I totally disagree with what the Ring magazine did, even though I have deep respect for their publication.
Definitely, I agree with that sentiment as well. Fight of the year, Dan.
Again, I don't know if there's a fight there was no.
A lot of people that I've spoken to have said Wood Conlon.
I was going to say there are definitely some good candidates. Nothing in my mind that was like the automatic, like, okay, you could see the fight in like March and be like, that's going to stand up by the end of the year or whatever. When Marco and I'm dating myself. When Barrera and Morales fought, back years ago for the first time.
Just picking us back. Just picking us back up, Dan. Sorry about that.
No problem. What I was saying about fight of the year, sometimes there's that fight where you see a fight and whatever time of the year it is, like that's going to be holding up by the end of the year, certainly in the top couple. And I think about fights that were at the beginning of the year, like, again, years ago with the first fight between Barrera and Morales, or Agati and Award. And then sometimes there's a fight that comes along at the very end of the year that does trump things, like, Felix Trinidad against Fernando Vargas, or those types of intense fights are, where they're on the list. But in terms of this year, there was nothing that stood out on that level to me, but there are some good fights. I mentioned earlier Castaño and Charlo in the rematch for undisputed at junior middleweight. That's a phenomenal fight. You mentioned Lee Wood against Michael Conlon. That was a hell of a fight with a super dramatic and exciting ending. So that's absolutely a candidate in terms of being on that list of candidates for fight of the year. There was nothing that's so overly dramatic, though. There's a couple others, though. Take, for example, there was a tremendous fight between Sebastian Fundora and Erickson Lubin. They were fighting for, I guess it was the interim WBC junior middleweight title. Here in the United States, that was a Showtime fight. That was a really outstanding fight in a very back and forth. Both guys were knocked down. Fundora got off the deck to get the stoppage. That's definitely on the list. And again, if you're going to mix men's fights with women's fights, you have to consider Serrano and Taylor. I don't care, what their gender is. That was just a great battle. If you like watching two people throw hands at each other, that was a hell of a fight also. Those are the main sort of fights that stand out in my mind. I might have missed a couple, but those are the ones. If I knew this was our specific topic, I'd have done a little studying before the interview, but I think I got I get another one for you. Again, I don't know how much it resonated in the United States or resonated in the UK, But to me, it doesn't matter where fights take place. And I'll go back years ago when I campaigned very hard for a fight that took place in France between Somsak Manchapur and against the Thailand fighter Sith Wachakal they were a junior featherweight championship fight. This is like in the early days of YouTube, and
Wow.
nobody sort of knew about the fight. I had seen a video of the fight, and somebody had put it on YouTube and cut it up into like 5 parts. And I told everybody who would listen. I remember standing up at our Boxing Writers Association of America meeting in Las Vegas where we're doing the nominations for the year-end awards. And I'm like, guys, trust me, please, I beg you, if you didn't see this fight, just trust me, put it on the ballot. And if you want, just hit me up after the meeting. I'll send you a DVD so you can watch the fight. And I was happy to burn those. And you know what? That fight was so fucking great. It won Fight of the Year. So the point is, it doesn't matter if it's in America, Britain, Mexico, somewhere else in Europe. It could be in Japan. It doesn't matter. Anyway, the fight I was going to mention, which was an unbelievably exciting fight, was the cruiserweight title fight between Opataya and Myris Bradis that took place in Australia much earlier this year. That was a fantastic battle, and that should be something that, again, I don't know if it will win, but certainly should be a consideration.
I know you're pretty upset with the whole year as a whole anyway. What has been the biggest upset of the year, do you reckon? A lot of people may look at the Ben Eubank situation, but what's your biggest upset?
Upset, like what I'm upset about?
Yeah, like what's the worst thing that's happened this year? So I don't mean upset in terms of
like a unexpected victory, but yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, anytime there's that type of situation with the drug test failure, it's a bummer. And in the case of what happened with Ben Eubank, that was such a big fight. That was definitely a big problem. And I can't say I'm like super upset about it. I kind of get it, but it still irritates the hell out of me. And I have this conversation with Gilberto Mendoza at the WBA on a regular basis. I understand that they made a policy and that they were trying to get to the point where they're going to have one champion per division instead of the 2 and the 3. But I feel like the process is taking too long. The process started in August of 2021. I knew it wasn't going to happen overnight. I get that. But it feels like it's taking a little bit too long to get down to one. I understand there's 4 major organizations. They're all going to have their champions. But there can't be one organization with multiple champions in the same weight class. That's just, it drives me absolutely fucking crazy. And they're working on it. And, just in recent times, they did just do a purse bid to consolidate their titles at strawweight. They did just have the situation come to a head in the featherweight division where Leo Santa Cruz vacated, leaving Lee Wood as the only WBA title holder in the featherweight division. They have ordered Triple G's fight against Arislandi Lara in the middleweight division. We'll see what happens with that. The point is they're making progress, and they're down now to like 6 divisions with 2 title holders out of the 18. But again, we're getting to the end, but it feels like it's slowed down a bit. So that annoys me. It's not like the end of the world, but it bugs me. And in terms of what else upsets me, it upsets me that fucking Spence and Crawford didn't make a fight.
Yeah.
That upsets me. And it upsets me that Tyson Fury had 2 great opponents that he could fight against, either Usyk for undisputed or Anthony Joshua, and neither fight happened. That upsets me. Now get off my lawn.
Broadcaster of the year, what would you choose? Who's done the most in terms of putting the best content out there?
I mean, I think for show in and show out, for the level of their production, for the level of their commentary, for their commitment to doing, top fights on a regular basis and putting together a robust schedule on a not an unlimited budget. I mean, look, I think all the broadcasters, at least the ones I watch here in the States, and I'm talking about mainly DAZN, ESPN, and Showtime. I don't count Fox anymore because they only did pay-per-views. But those 3 main outlets, they all did a fine job to certain degrees and had lots of big fights. But I got to give the nod to Showtime. It's no knock on DAZN. They do a hell of a job. They have a lot of good fights, both Golden Boy and Matchroom. Same thing with my old friends at ESPN and the folks at Top Rank. They had a lot of good fights this year. But Showtime, they roll out a schedule. They have a lot of top fights, both at the highest level, some pay-per-views, good contenders, some lesser title fights. They've got their Showbox series. In other words, they touch all the bases in terms of each level of boxing, and they do a really good job. And again, I think Showtime, I have to pick them as number 1, but DAZN and ESPN had a lot of worthy fights also. I mean, just this week as we tape this, you had Teofimo Lopez in the main event on ESPN, and then a couple of days later on ESPN Plus the Inoue fight. So Top Rank has delivered huge amounts of fights. What I love about what Top Rank does is not only do they deliver the top fights for their fighters here in the United States, but they also have been very aggressive in obtaining American rights to a lot of the good overseas fights that wind up on ESPN Plus. A lot of them come from Sky, who they have a deal with over in the UK. So they've picked up certain Frank Warren cards or certain boxer cards. And with DAZN, I mean, with the two main broadcasters that they work with, promoters rather, that they work with Matchroom and Golden Boy, you get a little bit of everything from both of those stables. So Matchroom has put on good shows in the UK. They put on some good shows in America. Chocolatito and Estrada, for example, the third fight just a few weeks ago. Golden Boy's had worthy shows, whether it was two Ryan Garcia fights this year, or the fights that they did with Zurdo Ramirez before he did the fight with Matchroom that they promoted over in Abu Dhabi. I think the Matchroom shows that have been on DAZN, where Matchroom has done a handful of shows in Mexico. Again, not the biggest name fights, but I'm going to tell you what, those shows in Mexico, every single one of them has delivered good quality entertainment and action, even if they weren't the biggest names. So I think all three of the broadcasters here in America did a good job. But, to answer your question, I gotta go with Showtime number one. And part of it's because of I just feel like their team, their broadcast team, just gels so well together. Everybody knows their exact role. It's defined. And I've been friendly with Al Bernstein for over 20 years. And Al Bernstein, to me, he is the glue of that team. He does an awesome job. He's down the middle. He doesn't take favorites. He doesn't get up too much, doesn't get down too much. Mauro Ranallo, the blow-by-blow announcer, and he knows this. I couldn't stand him when he started, and I've joked around about that. But he's grown on me. He's matured as a boxing announcer. He doesn't just make it sound like he's doing a wrestling match anymore like he used to. He's become top-notch. Abner Maris provides excellent insight as a former champion to what he does in terms of their team. Brian Custer is the consummate professional and when it comes to hosting an event. And they have one of the great interviewers of all time, my good buddy Jim Gray, who does a great job handling the interview duties. So they just have a great team where everybody knows their role and everybody does it, and they do a good job. And that's a credit to their whole production team. Steve Espinoza, props to him. Steve Espinoza is one of the few guys that can get Al Heyman to give him certain fights that he wants. Now, it's not everything is perfect. There's some fights that they can make better, but all in all, they do a very good job.
Yeah, definitely. I was over there for the well, it's not on the same content. The Paul silver card, and I was able to speak to Espinoza over there. But moving swiftly on, then, what was your favourite moment of the year? Like you said, it's hard to choose from, but if you could choose a favourite moment, what would it be?
My favorite moment, man, that's a tough one. You got any suggestions? I really don't know what to say.
God, it has, like you said, it has been quite lackluster, really. For me, it would have been Conlan Wood in terms of my favourite moment, what I experienced at an event. But I can't really speak for you.
That was a pretty remarkable knockout. The change of fortunes in that fight, because Conlan looks like he's on the way to sure victory. He's ahead on the scorecards. He's had Lee Wood dropped him early in the fight. And to have it turn around like that was pretty remarkable. I don't know if I can pinpoint it, though. It's not like...
It's Shields Marshall, I'd say. That was probably my favourite moment, my favourite event I've been to this year. I mean, like Ricky Hatton having his comeback fight exhibition, I really enjoyed that. But I thought Christian Shields, Savannah Marshall was a coming-of-age fight, really. And it was good, really, to be in the arena. It was a different atmosphere. I knew a lot of people that were going, and it was just a really good night. So I'd say that was my favourite moment of the year, I'd say. It was a good fight as well. Don't get me wrong, huge fight.
Yeah, I mean, look, I obviously I covered a number of fights in person also, whether it was being at both of Canelo's fights against Bivol and against Triple G in the third fight. I was at Oscar Valdez's unification with Shakur Stevenson and Joe Smith's unification against Arthur Beterbiev. Was just in New York last week for the Teofimo Lopez card and a few other shows. And I don't know if it was my favorite moment, but it was sort of I can't say it was that huge of a surprise, but seeing a fighter like Dimitri Bivol, who I knew was a tremendous fighter, and even though he was the underdog, and I can't sit here and tell you I didn't pick Canelo to win that fight, But to see him not just win, but to do it in the way he did it with just a total professionalism, and I can't say total domination because Canelo did win rounds in that fight, but that was a really good performance to see a guy that never really got the spotlight until that fight to show up and really produce on that night. And it's the reason why, as we've been talking about who should be the fighter of the year, he's on the top of the list. The Zurdo Ramirez victory was just sort of icing on the cake for that sort of fighter of the year performance. So I guess I'd have to say seeing Bivol rise to the occasion against Canelo, and also to Canelo's credit, to have the balls to go up and wait to take on the monster like that. So I have to give Canelo Alvarez credit for doing what so many fighters won't do, which is to gamble, to take the risk, to make a fight that they have a chance to lose. And Canelo, he took the opportunity to make that fight. He didn't win, but I don't change my opinion just because he lost. I still have ample respect for Canelo Alvarez for having the stones to go for it.
Yeah, perhaps more respect because of that, I'd say as well. Moving on to 2023, what would be a good 2023, Dan?
A good 2023 would be to see some of the fights that we didn't get in 2022 finally happen. I want to make sure that in 2023 we still see, or finally see, Spence and Crawford, that we see Tyson Fury. I mean, this would be the dream. Tyson Fury takes on Usyk in the first part of the year. And then, if he wins and becomes undisputed, whatever happens with the belts, so be it. But then to fight Anthony Joshua. Obviously, if Usyk beats Tyson Fury, we don't need to see a third fight between him and Anthony Joshua. And if I'd like to see whether it's for a title or an eliminator or whatever, I'd like to see in 2023 a match between Joshua and Deontay Wilder. I don't know how realistic that is. I mean, they talk about it all the time, but they've been talking about it for about 4 years. So I'll believe it when I see it. So those matchups would make for a good year. To have a day where I can wake up and look at the list of champions and see the WBA has one champion in every weight class would be a very positive thing. Those are definitely things. I think, a year where there's not as much bickering between the promotion companies and the TV networks, that fights can get made. That, like, for example, we see the Ryan Garcia Tank Davis fight actually come off. So that would mean they have to win these interim fights. Again, that contract is not signed. Hopefully they'll get it all worked out and it will get signed. That may be a bit too much to ask for all that stuff, but give me a couple of them and I probably can be happy.
Dan, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you this year. Enjoy your Christmas, mate, and I'll catch up with you probably in 2023, mate.
Thank you, Harry. I hope to see you on the road down the road.